Imagine opening a worn-out Betty Crocker cookbook, its pages yellowed with age, and stumbling across a chapter of pies you've probably never even heard of. Pies that once graced holiday tables, church gatherings, and Sunday dinners, now nearly forgotten. These weren't just desserts, they were snapshots of an America that knew how to turn the simplest of ingredients into something extraordinary. Back in the mid-20th century, pie wasn't just a treat, it was a symbol of home. Families gathered around the table, and every pie told a story. Sometimes it was about making do with what you had, like a mock apple pie crafted with nothing more than crackers and sugar. Other times it was about creativity, like turning green tomatoes, dandelions, or even cornflakes into pies that somehow worked. Betty Crocker captured these recipes not only as instructions, but as traditions, passing them from one generation to the next. Yet, as taste shifted and store-bought desserts took over, many of these once beloved pies disappeared from our kitchens. Today, we're bringing them back, 15 pies that once defined comfort and celebration, now nearly lost to time. From the tangy bite of rhubarb custard pie to the sweetness of butterscotch meringue, from the home-style heart of sour cream raisin pie to the surprising charm of oatmeal pie, these desserts reveal how inventive, resourceful, and downright bold American kitchens used to be. So, get ready to step back into a world where pie was more than food, it was family, memory, and tradition baked into a flaky crust. And if you love rediscovering forgotten recipes, don't forget to subscribe and join me on this journey through America's most nostalgic flavors. Our first forgotten treasure is the butterscotch meringue pie, a dessert that once felt like pure luxury on the American table. Long before instant pudding mixes and packaged sweets, butterscotch was a flavor carefully made from scratch. Housewives would melt butter and brown sugar together, coaxing out that deep, caramel-like richness, then blend it into a smooth custard that filled the pie shell with warmth and comfort. What made this pie so memorable wasn't just the filling, but the crown of meringue on top. Fluffy, cloud-like peaks, whipped from simple egg whites and sugar, were baked until golden. That contrast, the soft, creamy butterscotch beneath and the airy, lightly crisp meringue above, was nothing short of magic. Each bite was a balance of richness and lightness, a dessert that felt elegant yet entirely homemade. In mid-century America, pies like this weren't reserved for special occasions alone. They often showed up at potlucks, church socials, or Sunday dinners. A butterscotch meringue pie carried a sense of pride, proof that a cook could transform pantry staples into something worthy of admiration. It was sweet nostalgia on a plate, comforting and celebratory at the same time. But as convenience foods grew popular, the art of making custard pies slowly faded. Boxed pudding replaced the slow stirring over the stove, and whipped toppings replaced real meringue. The butterscotch meringue pie quietly slipped into the background, remembered mostly by those who grew up tasting it at their grandmother's table. Today, it stands as a symbol of a bygone era, a pie that required patience, care, and a love for tradition. And while you don't see it much anymore, one glance at its golden meringue and silky filling is enough to transport you back to a kitchen filled with the sweet scent of sugar, butter, and memory. Our second forgotten pie takes us to the gardens of early American summers, the rhubarb custard pie. Back then, rhubarb wasn't just another plant, it was one of the first signs of spring, pushing through the soil when little else had ripened. Families saw it as a gift of the season, a tart, vibrant stalk that could be turned into something extraordinary. The recipe was simple, yet genius. Fresh rhubarb was chopped into chunks, its sourness softened by sugar and folded into a silky custard filling. The custard mellowed the sharp bite of rhubarb, creating a balance of tangy and creamy that was unlike anything else. Baked in a flaky crust, it emerged as a pie that was both refreshing and comforting, perfect for the first warm days of the year. In many small towns, this pie was a spring tradition. Families would gather around the table, and the tart sweet aroma drifting from the oven was a sure sign that winter was truly over. It was the kind of dessert that made people pause, smile, and savor a taste that belonged to its season alone. But as the decades passed, rhubarb lost its place in many American backyards. Grocery stores favored fruits that shipped easier and lasted longer, and custard pies began to feel old-fashioned compared to boxed mixes and frozen treats. The rhubarb custard pie, once a household favorite, faded quietly into memory. Yet, it remains one of Betty Crocker's most charming creations, a pie that celebrated nature's timing and a cook's creativity. One slice carried both the brightness of spring and the warmth of home. For those who remember it, this pie isn't just food, it's a reminder of family gardens, shared laughter, and the fleeting sweetness of a season gone by. Our third forgotten recipe might sound strange at first, vinegar pie. But don't let the name fool you, this was once a staple of American kitchens, especially during hard times. Born in the 19th century and carried into the Great Depression, vinegar pie was the definition of resourcefulness. When lemons were scarce and fresh fruit hard to come by, vinegar became the clever substitute. The filling was made from eggs, sugar, butter, and just a splash of vinegar. That tangy kick mimicked the brightness of lemon, transforming a few humble pantry ingredients into something remarkably satisfying. Baked in a buttery crust, the pie emerged golden and fragrant, with a custard-like filling that was sweet, slightly tart, and surprisingly refreshing. For families struggling to put food on the table, this pie wasn't just dessert, it was proof of survival and ingenuity. It showed how, with creativity, even the simplest items on a kitchen shelf could become a treat worth celebrating. At church socials, community suppers, or holiday gatherings, vinegar pie reminded people that comfort could come from the unlikeliest of places. Over time, as lemons, limes, and tropical fruits became widely available year-round, vinegar pie slipped quietly into the background. To modern ears, its name may sound unappealing, but for earlier generations, it was a symbol of making do without sacrificing sweetness. Today, it stands as a forgotten relic of resilience, a dessert born out of necessity, flavored with memory, and tied to an America that knew how to create joy even in lean times. One slice of vinegar pie told a story that hardship could still end with a sweet ending at the family table. Our fourth forgotten pie may surprise you, green tomato pie. At first glance, it sounds more like a vegetable casserole than a dessert, but in earlier American kitchens, nothing went to waste. When summer was ending and tomatoes were still hanging green on the vine, clever home cooks found a way to turn them into a pie that mimicked fruit. The process was simple but brilliant. Sliced green tomatoes were layered into a pastry shell, sprinkled generously with sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and sometimes a splash of vinegar or lemon for brightness. As the pie baked, the tomatoes softened, releasing juices that thickened into a sweet, tangy filling, almost like apple pie. Topped with a flaky crust, it was golden, aromatic, and unexpectedly delicious. For families living through the 19th and early 20th centuries, this pie was both thrifty and inventive. Instead of letting unripened tomatoes spoil, they became the centerpiece of a dessert that brought comfort to the table. Farmers, especially in the South and Midwest, considered it a seasonal tradition, a creative way to stretch the harvest and capture every bit of value from the garden. Over the years, though, as canned fruits, refined sugars, and store-bought pies became more accessible, the humble green tomato pie disappeared. Its resourceful roots made it feel old-fashioned, and few modern cooks ever thought of turning vegetables into something so sweet. But this pie holds more than flavor. It carries a story of ingenuity, resilience, and the creativity of home cooks who refuse to let anything go to waste. One slice tells of kitchens where resourcefulness was as important as taste, and where even a green tomato could be transformed into a dessert that families remembered fondly. Our fifth forgotten pie is one of the most talked about recipes from Betty Crocker's collection, the mock apple pie. At first glance, it looked and tasted almost identical to a traditional apple pie, but there wasn't a single apple inside. Instead, its secret ingredient was something found in nearly every pantry: crackers. During the Great Depression and even into World War II, apples could be expensive or hard to come by. Families who wanted that warm, comforting apple pie flavor had to improvise. The solution was ingenious. Bakers layered Ritz-style crackers into a pie shell, then poured over a syrup made from sugar, water, lemon juice, and plenty of cinnamon. As the mixture baked, the crackers absorbed the syrup, softening into a tender, fruit-like filling that fooled nearly everyone at the table. The beauty of this pie wasn't just its flavor, but its illusion. At church suppers and community gatherings, it was a little trick of the trade, a dessert that captured the essence of apple pie without the apples. For many, it symbolized creativity in the face of scarcity, proving that dessert wasn't out of reach even in the hardest of times. Over the decades, as fresh produce became available year-round, the mock apple pie fell out of fashion. Some laughed at its simplicity, while others remembered it with fondness as the taste of their childhood. Today, it's more of a curiosity than a staple, but in its time, it was a lifesaver, and a sweet reminder of how American cooks could transform the humblest of ingredients into something comforting and familiar. The mock apple pie may not be common anymore, but it remains a delicious symbol of resilience, resourcefulness, and the enduring love for pie that never faded from the American table. Our sixth forgotten pie comes from a community known for simplicity and tradition, the Shakers. The Shaker lemon pie was unlike anything else because it used the whole lemon, peel and all. While most bakers tossed out the rinds, the Shakers believed in wasting nothing, turning every slice of fruit into something extraordinary. The recipe was straightforward yet bold. Thinly sliced lemons were macerated in sugar until their rind softened, releasing oils that infused the filling with a fragrant intensity. Beaten eggs were added to create a custard-like base, and everything was poured into a flaky crust. When baked, the result was a pie that balanced tartness and sweetness with a hint of bitterness from the peel, an honest, full-bodied flavor that felt rustic and refreshing. In Shaker communities of the 19th century, this pie carried deep meaning. It wasn't just dessert, it was a reflection of their values, simplicity, resourcefulness, and respect for every ingredient. By using the whole lemon, they honored the belief that nothing from nature should go to waste. Families who enjoyed this pie often described it as bright, clean, and refreshing, a perfect end to a hearty meal. But as time went on, its bold flavors became less familiar. Modern palates leaned toward milder desserts, and store-bought pies replaced the patience of hand-slicing lemons and slow maceration. The Shaker lemon pie quietly faded into obscurity, surviving only in a few regional cookbooks and the memories of those who grew up with it. Today, it stands as a reminder of an America that valued tradition and thrift, where every slice told a story of community and simplicity. One bite of shaker lemon pie captured not just the taste of a fruit, but the spirit of a way of life now nearly forgotten. Our seventh forgotten pie takes us back to farmhouse kitchens and rustic American tables, the molasses cream pie. Before refined white sugar was widely available, molasses was the sweetener of choice. Dark, rich, and full of character, it found its way into breads, cookies, and of course, pies. This particular recipe blended the bold flavor of molasses with the smooth luxury of cream, creating a dessert that was as hearty as it was comforting. The filling began with molasses, eggs, and cream simmered together, thickened into a silky custard, and poured into a flaky pie shell. Once baked, it carried a deep caramel color and a flavor that was earthy, slightly smoky, and sweet in a way modern desserts rarely are. Some variations were topped with a dusting of nutmeg or cinnamon, adding warmth to each bite. For families in the 19th and early 20th centuries, this pie was more than just dessert, it was a taste of tradition. Molasses was affordable and easy to store, making it a pantry staple in both rural and working-class homes. Paired with fresh cream from the farm, it became a pie that represented comfort, simplicity, and homegrown ingenuity. But as sugar became cheap and modern desserts leaned toward lighter, sweeter flavors, molasses-based pies slipped out of fashion. By mid-century, the molasses cream pie was nearly forgotten, overshadowed by chocolate, fruit, and boxed puddings that felt more modern to American families. Yet, for those who remember it, this pie was unforgettable. It spoke of a time when desserts were tied to the land, when every ingredient had a story, and when richness wasn't about excess but about depth of flavor. One slice of molasses cream pie tasted like history itself, dark, sweet, and enduring. Our eighth forgotten pie is one that carried both comfort and surprise, the sour cream raisin pie. For many Midwestern families, this was a staple at church gatherings and holiday tables, a dessert that combined humble ingredients into something unexpectedly rich and flavorful. The filling began with raisins simmered until plump, then stirred into a custard made of sour cream, eggs, and sugar. Spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and sometimes cloves gave the mixture warmth, while the sour cream added a tangy depth that balanced the natural sweetness of the raisins. Once baked inside a flaky crust, the pie set into a creamy, spiced filling that was as satisfying as it was unique. This pie carried special meaning during the early to mid-20th century, especially in farming communities. Raisins were affordable, stored well, and could be used when fresh fruit wasn't available. Sour cream, meanwhile, brought richness without waste, turning what might have been leftovers into something truly memorable. Together, they created a dessert that felt both practical and indulgent. For many families, the sour cream raisin pie was more than a recipe, it was tradition. It was the dessert Grandma made every Thanksgiving, or the pie that appeared at community suppers, where slices disappeared faster than anything else on the table. Its tangy sweet flavor may have been unusual to outsiders, but to those who grew up with it, it was the taste of home. As American tastes shifted toward simpler, sweeter flavors, this pie slowly faded. Today, very few bakeries or kitchens keep the tradition alive. But for those who remember, sour cream raisin pie is pure nostalgia, a reminder of family gatherings, kitchen warmth, and the creativity of cooks who turned simple ingredients into unforgettable flavors. Our ninth forgotten pie is one that might raise eyebrows today, prune whip pie. Once upon a time, prunes weren't just thought of as health food, they were a pantry essential, used to add natural sweetness and nutrition to family desserts. And this pie, in particular, showed just how creative home cooks could be with something so simple. The process started by stewing prunes until soft, then whipping them into a light puree. That puree was folded into beaten egg whites and sugar, creating a fluffy, airy filling with a delicate sweetness. Poured into a baked crust and sometimes topped with whipped cream, the result was a pie that was surprisingly elegant, light, fruity, and just sweet enough to feel indulgent without being heavy. In mid-century America, prune whip pie often appeared at community gatherings and church socials. It was praised for its texture, almost like a fruit mousse, and for the fact that it used affordable ingredients already stocked in most kitchens. During lean times, when fresh fruit was hard to come by, prunes were a lifesaver. This pie turned them into something that felt celebratory, proving that frugality didn't have to mean dull flavors. But as decades passed, prunes lost their reputation as a dessert fruit. They became associated more with health remedies than with indulgence, and the prune whip pie faded from cookbooks and memory. To modern ears, it may sound unusual, but for earlier generations, it was both familiar and beloved. Today, this pie stands as a reminder that even the simplest, most overlooked ingredients once had a place at the center of the table. Light, nostalgic, and resourceful, prune whip pie captured the spirit of its time, a dessert that was humble yet unforgettable. Our 10th forgotten pie is one that celebrated local harvests, grape pie. While apples and cherries may have dominated most pie traditions, in certain regions of America, especially upstate New York and Pennsylvania, grapes were the star of the season. Families who lived near vineyards or grew Concord grapes in their gardens knew the joy of turning them into a pie that was bold, juicy, and unforgettable. The recipe began with painstaking work. Each grape had to be peeled, the skin set aside, and the pulp cooked until soft. Seeds were strained out, then the skins were mixed back in with sugar and a touch of spice. Baked inside a golden crust, the pie emerged fragrant, deeply purple, and bursting with a sweet tart flavor unlike anything else. Every slice stained plates with its rich color, a badge of authenticity that no canned fruit could imitate. For families in grape-growing regions, this pie wasn't just dessert, it was tradition. It marked the end of summer and the start of fall, when harvest time brought communities together. Church picnics, family gatherings, and local fairs often featured grape pies, each recipe slightly different but all carrying the same spirit of celebration. But outside these regions, grape pie never fully caught on. As store-bought pies became popular and easier options replaced the labor of peeling and seeding grapes, this dessert faded from the national table. Today, it survives mostly as a local specialty, remembered fondly by those who grew up tasting it at their grandmother's kitchen. Still, grape pie tells an important story, that American desserts were once deeply tied to the land and the seasons. One slice carried the richness of harvest, the pride of local tradition, and the joy of turning something humble into something extraordinary. Our 11th forgotten pie is one that proves just how creative early American kitchens could be: a carrot pie. Long before pumpkin pie became the star of autumn tables, carrot pie was already a trusted stand-in, offering nearly the same flavor and texture with ingredients pulled straight from the garden. The recipe began by boiling or grating fresh carrots until tender, then blending them with eggs, cream, sugar, and warming spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and ginger. Baked inside a flaky crust, the pie emerged golden orange, its smooth filling both sweet and earthy. To many, it tasted remarkably close to pumpkin pie, creamy, spiced, and comforting, yet with a lighter, fresher touch. For farm families in the 18th and 19th centuries, carrot pie was a way to make do with what they had. Pumpkins weren't always available, but carrots stored well through the winter, making them a reliable substitute. This pie was often served at harvest celebrations, holidays, and Sunday suppers, where no one thought twice about carrots belonging in dessert. But as canned pumpkin became widely available in the 20th century, carrot pie slowly lost its place. Pumpkin pie stole the spotlight, and carrots returned to the role of side dishes and salads. To modern eaters, the idea of a carrot pie may sound unusual, but for earlier generations, it was a familiar and beloved treat. Today, carrot pie stands as a reminder of a time when cooking was flexible, resourceful, and deeply tied to the rhythms of the farm. It's a dessert that carried the warmth of home, the practicality of the garden, and the creativity of cooks who knew how to turn humble vegetables into something worthy of celebration. Our 12th forgotten pie is one that shows just how inventive American home cooks could be: a dandelion pie. Yes, the same dandelions that sprout across lawns and fields were once gathered, washed, and transformed into a dessert that was both thrifty and surprisingly delicious. The recipe often called for the tender young leaves or blossoms, which were chopped finely and blended into a custard-like base of eggs, cream, sugar, and sometimes a touch of nutmeg or lemon. Baked inside a flaky crust, the pie took on a flavor that was earthy, slightly herbal, and gently sweet. Some versions leaned toward a springtime custard, while others added honey to highlight the floral notes of the dandelion blossoms themselves. For rural families, especially during the 19th and early 20th centuries, this pie wasn't strange, it was practical. Dandelions grew abundantly, cost nothing, and offered a way to put something fresh and nutritious on the table when money was scarce. Turning weeds into pie was the very definition of resourcefulness, and it reflected a time when cooks wasted nothing and used everything nature provided. Dandelion pie often appeared in farmhouse kitchens during spring, when gardens had yet to yield much else. It carried with it the promise of warmer days, a symbol of resilience and the ability to create sweetness out of what others overlooked. But as store-bought produce filled grocery shelves and dandelions came to be seen only as lawn nuisances, this humble pie faded into obscurity. Few recipes survive today, but those that do remind us of an era when every ingredient had value. Dandelion pie may not return to modern tables, but it remains a fascinating glimpse into America's culinary past, a story of creativity, survival, and the beauty of turning the ordinary into something extraordinary. Our 13th forgotten pie is a twist on a Southern classic, the cranberry chess pie. Chess pies were once a staple in American kitchens, known for their simple custard-like filling made from sugar, eggs, butter, and just a little flour or cornmeal to hold it together. But in some homes, especially in the Northeast, a tart addition found its way in: cranberries. The recipe blended the bright, sharp flavor of cranberries with the rich sweetness of the traditional chess filling. As the pie baked, the berries softened and burst, streaking the custard with jewel red color and adding a tangy contrast that cut through the sugary richness. The result was a dessert that felt both festive and comforting, a pie that could shine just as easily at Thanksgiving as it could at an ordinary Sunday supper. In the mid-20th century, this pie represented the blending of traditions. The chess pie carried Southern roots, while the cranberries reflected New England's harvests. Together, they created a dessert that felt distinctly American, a sweet tart balance that celebrated both thrift and creativity. But over time, cranberry chess pie slipped into the shadows. Traditional chess pies stayed popular in the South, while cranberries became tied almost exclusively to sauce at holiday dinners. Few cooks bothered to keep the recipe alive, and eventually it disappeared from most kitchens and cookbooks. Still, this pie tells a story worth remembering. It was proof that families weren't afraid to experiment, to blend regional flavors, and to make use of what was in season. Each slice offered contrast, tart and sweet, bright and rich, familiar and daring all at once. Cranberry chess pie may be forgotten now, but it remains one of Betty Crocker's most inventive celebrations of American flavor. Part 14. Tomato Pie. Once upon a time, before pizza took over the American imagination, there was another pie that turned humble tomatoes into the star of the show. Betty Crocker's tomato pie was a savory twist on the classic idea of pie, bringing garden-fresh flavors straight to the dinner table. This recipe often started with a flaky crust, baked just enough to hold layers of sliced ripe tomatoes. Between those juicy red slices, cooks tucked in fresh herbs, a little onion, and sometimes even breadcrumbs to soak up the juices. The whole dish was topped with a mixture of mayonnaise and shredded cheese, which baked into a golden, bubbly crown. Tomato pie wasn't about sweetness, it was about savoring the harvest. In the mid-20th century, many American families grew their own tomatoes in backyard gardens. When baskets of them ripened all at once, this pie was a clever way to put them to use before they spoiled. It was economical, practical, and absolutely delicious when served warm with a simple salad. But as frozen dinners and take-out pizza grew in popularity, tomato pie slowly disappeared from the average kitchen. Today, it survives in small pockets of the South, where heirloom recipes are fiercely protected. Betty Crocker's tomato pie is a reminder of how creative home cooks once were, transforming everyday vegetables into comfort food that carried the taste of summer into every bite. Part 15. Vinegar Pie. Our final forgotten pie might surprise you, because its star ingredient isn't fruit, nuts, or even chocolate. It's vinegar. Yes, Betty Crocker once shared recipes for vinegar pie, a dessert born from necessity that turned pantry staples into something surprisingly delightful. The pie dates back to pioneer days and resurfaced during the Great Depression when ingredients like lemons were scarce. Vinegar stepped in as a clever substitute, giving the custard filling a tangy brightness that mimicked citrus. Mixed with sugar, eggs, butter, and a dash of spices, the sharpness of vinegar softened into a sweet, custardy flavor that was far more comforting than it sounds. Baked inside a flaky crust, vinegar pie was smooth, slightly tart, and sweet enough to satisfy cravings when times were tough. Families cherished it not because it was extravagant, but because it proved that even the simplest ingredients could create a dessert worth gathering around the table for. Over time, as America gained access to more exotic fruits and refined ingredients, vinegar pie faded from memory. To modern cooks, it may sound unusual, even unappealing, but in its day, it was a symbol of resilience, creativity, and the determination to find sweetness in hard times. Betty Crocker's vinegar pie reminds us that food isn't just about flavor, it's about survival, tradition, and the comfort of knowing that no matter how little you had, you could still make something special to share.